this week's Vaticano, we take a look back at the first 6 months of Pope Francis' papacy, and the Argentinian Pope shares a reflection during the Angelus on the infinite strength of love. New bishops of the world descend on Rome for a special Vatican course that will help them take on their new roles. 3,000 members of the Order of the Holy Sepulcher of Jerusalem make a pilgrimage to the tomb of St. Peter for the Year of Faith. All this, plus we hear from the new Polish ambassador to the Holy See and take a closer look at Pope Francis' cross. All this coming up on Vaticano. With just 6 months under his belt as Pope, Francis has broken the mold. Without breaking the continuity with his predecessors, Jorge Mario Bergoglio is changing the way the Church is viewed, without changing Catholic teaching. The direct approach, humility, and visible joy of the Argentinian Pope have conquered the hearts of believers and non-believers alike, who see in his witness the mercy of God. This Uruguayan, Professor Guzman Cariquiri, has known Pope Francis for more than 40 years, and Bergoglio has always been full of surprises.
El pontificado de Francisco.
Francis' pontificate is an evangelical revolution. But when I say an evangelical revolution, I'm not saying, as some in the press have, that it's a rupture with all of the great tradition of the Church. No, not at all. That's not true. It's extraordinary how the great patrimony of faith of the tradition of the Church is communicated through such different pontificates, with such different personalities, that come from such different cultural contexts, formations, spiritual sensitivities, and styles. And in spite of this, there's that extraordinary continuity. But that evangelical revolution was certainly needed, which returned to the gospel, to the source, without the mincing of words.
The
pontificate of the wise and holy Benedict XVI was a papacy that was suffered and lived almost like the way of the cross, which in part, thanks to his resignation, to God's providence in his resignation, gave rise to this explosion of joy and hope in the pontificate of Francis. I call it an evangelical revolution in the traditional sense of a reform from the head down to the limbs that the Pope is carrying out, because he is calling all of us, and most of all the pastors of the Church, to a conversion. He is showing the shepherds of the Church what he wants of them. He doesn't need to write them out a list of responsibilities and obligations. He is showing them with his own example, with his own witness, but also everyone else, from the shepherds down to the very last of the faithful.
For this veteran Vatican observer who foresaw the election of Bergoglio to the papacy and was there shortly after to congratulate him, the Pope is breaking new ground.
The first change he's done in the Vatican is changing how the papacy is exercised. He's showing how the papacy can be exercised differently. So he doesn't go up to the palace, he stays down below so he can be close to people. When he meets the delegates of the other Christian churches and the other religions, he doesn't sit on a high dais. He has on the same level as them. And this gets across. He's made a connection with the Orthodox immediately by calling himself the Bishop of Rome, which is of course his title, not Pope, not the Supreme Pontiff, but Bishop of Rome. And for that reason, for the first time in 1,000 years, the ecumenical patriarch of the Orthodox, in other words, the #1 in the Orthodox Church world, came and attended his inauguration. The second change is a moral change, and that's his little homilies every morning in the Santa Martha Church. He's communicating because he believes you can change structures, but if you don't change the hearts of people, you don't change anything. And so he's going directly to the hearts of people through those morning homilies. The third change is, of course, he's brought in a Secretary of State who will start now on the 15th of October, who's a really experienced man, a man of dialogue, a man like himself in many ways, a humble man, a man who doesn't want to be the prima donna, but who knows how to dialogue with the governments and with the modern world. And then the fourth change, He has understood, and it was what was discussed in the meetings before the conclave, that the Pope governs with the bishops. And so he's created a council of 8 cardinals, one from each continent, who will help him in the government of the Church. And this is very important because now the whole Church feels cardinal from the Congo in Africa, where the war is still going on. Cardinal from Australia. We got one from Boston. Two from Latin America, because we also got one from Honduras and one from Chile. One from Bombay. And so you've got these, and then one from Germany. And these are to help him to bring in feedback from the bishops and the Church in those different continents of how the Church should be approaching different questions.
Altogether, the first 6 months of this pontificate have shown a change in the perception of the Catholic Church in the world that has also laid the groundwork for the changes Pope Francis is expected to make in the Vatican in the months and years ahead. In a rain-soaked St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis addressed the public before leading them in prayer on September the 15th. He invited them to be merciful and rediscover every day the infinite strength of love.
La misericordia è la vera forza.
Mercy is the true force that can save man and the world from the cancer of sin, from moral and spiritual malaise. Only love can fill the gaps, the negative abysses that evil opens up in our hearts and in history. Only love can do this, and this is the joy of God.
He told them that it's not enough to just go through the actions seeking salvation.
If there is no mercy in our hearts, if we do not experience the joy of forgiveness, we are not in communion with God, even if we observe all the commandments, because it is love that saves, not the simple observance of rules. It is in love for God and for our neighbor that the commandments are fulfilled. The love of God, His happiness, is in forgiveness. He always waits for us. You might feel a weight on your soul, a regret. I tell you, don't worry. He is waiting for you. He is the Father. He always waits for us.
Before saying goodbye, Pope Francis congratulated all Argentinians on the beatification of their newest saint, the cowboy priest, Father José Gabriel Brochero.
I wish to join the Church in Argentina in its joy at the beatification of this exemplary shepherd, who from the back of a mule rode the arid paths of his parish tirelessly, searching house by house for the people who were commended to him, to bring them to God. Let us ask Christ for the intercession of the new blessed, that priests be multiplied in number, and that imitating Father Brochero, they deliver their lives to the service of evangelization, kneeling often before the crucifix, as they give witness everywhere to the love and the mercy of God.
This Argentinian bishop worked with Pope Francis back in Buenos Aires. For him, the beatification of the so-called cura Brochero must be remembered.
In Argentina, we are really celebrating. This gift of the beatification is a big reason to celebrate. Brochero was a cowboy priest. He spoke with the language of the people, using their words. But he never stopped proclaiming the gospel, never stopped being concerned for the evangelization of men without forgetting about the women and children. Of course, because he knew very well that if he didn't evangelize the men, they would continue to beat their wives, not respecting them or treating them with dignity. And he knew that Jesus could change hearts. We are very hopeful that Father Brochero will strengthen the pastoral and evangelizing action in Argentina.
After a quick break, we'll be back to catch up with a pair of American bishops as they take part in the new Bishops' Congress in Rome. Thanks for watching. This is Vaticano. Rome's Regina Apostolorum University hosted new bishops of the world for 10 days this month. It was a chance for them to receive an orientation both in what to expect now as shepherds of dioceses and how to work more closely with the Vatican.
I'm here with about 120 other bishops for the what I've called informally the Bishop School. It's the pilgrimage to the tomb of Peter. All the new bishops since last year in September are invited, and I think most, if they possibly can, participate. This morning we had the very first conference, just hearing from Bishop Mueller from the Congregation of the Faith. Just reflections on the role of the bishop, the kind of the theological meaning of being a bishop, a function of unity in the diversity of the world. One of the beautiful images that was in Bishop Mueller's paper was being cohesión de Cristo, to be glued to Christ in English, to be that closely united to Christ is the role of the bishop. That's one that I picked up on. But it's basically was a reflection on what is the theological role of the bishop. Not just a manager, but a presence of Christ, bringing the universal church to the local church and the local church back to the universal church. Well, I think it is a great function of the unity of the church, the universality. Just being here, speaking all the different languages, seeing the bishops from Iraq and the bishops from Texas and the bishops from England and Ireland and South America, it just reminds us that the church truly is Catholic, truly is universal. I think that's a very important aspect of it. We will have a chance to meet with the Holy Father, and that, you know, is a beautiful opportunity also of the successor of Peter. And then just to learn commonly some kind of refresher course on what we all studied in our classes years ago, and just to help us remember and hear the same message about what the role of the bishop is in the diverse parts of the world.
Having an opportunity to talk with new bishops from around the world and ask them questions about their diocese, where they're from, what the challenges are that they're facing, what their experiences have been. It's been illuminating. It really has been exciting, I guess, to have that opportunity to converse with bishops from such diverse backgrounds.
For each of them, the experience of being a bishop is not without its challenges, but also not without its joys.
I was ordained in November of 2012, one of the last named by Pope Benedict, and then of course we hear that he's resigning, and then, you know, of course Pope Francis. I have to reflect on my own personal journey. I was ordained as a priest of Dallas, Texas, which is next door. Tyler was part of that diocese, and then a year and a half later it was separated as a separate diocese. So I've always reflected on those words in the ordination. You promise obedience to that bishop and his successors. I had no idea how quickly the successors would come along. I've served 3 bishops in the Diocese of Tyler, and I'm the 4th bishop of the diocese. So it really is a reminder of what that commitment is, and a reminder that it really is all about Christ. He's the continuity of the church. Bishops come and go, priests come and go, popes come and go, but Christ remains.
It's been, I think, a very good, very comfortable transition to a new diocese. Obviously, there are many things about the new diocese, the Diocese of Fargo, that I still have to learn, but it's been very enjoyable. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to get around the state and to visit the different parishes, especially to get to know the priests of the diocese, who obviously I work with very closely, and they're my closest collaborators. So I've really made a point to try to get to know them as much as possible. And everybody has been very welcoming. I feel very much at home there. People have been extraordinarily kind.
During the general audience on September the 18th, Pope Francis spoke for the 2nd consecutive week on the Church as a mother.
Queridos hermanos y hermanas, retomo de nuevo hoy la imagen.
Dear brothers and sisters, I return today to the image of the Church as a mother. on the basis of what a mother does for her children. First, she, with kindness, affection, and love, teaches them to walk on the path of life, and she knows how to orient them when they are steered off the path. Equally, the Church teaches the road of life through the commandments, which are an invitation to not have material idols, but to remember God, to have respect for parents, to be honest, to be close to our neighbor. Secondly, a mother, despite the fact that her children become adults, accompanies them along the way. And even if they make mistakes, she understands, protects, and helps them. This is how the Church is, a merciful mother who seeks to help and never closes the doors of her home, but always offers her love and invites a retaking of the way to those who have lost it. Lastly, a mother prays and entrusts her children to God, in particular those who are weakest and in greatest need. The Church does the same, placing all of the situations of her children in the hands of the Lord. She entrusts them to the power of prayer, in which God does not remain indifferent. He always knows how to surprise us. Mother Church is conscious of that.
Also during the audience, the Pope made an appeal for peace in the world ahead of the September 21st International Day of Peace.
Invito I cattolici di tutto il mondo ad unirsi agli altri cristiani per continuare ad implorare a Dio.
I invite the Catholics of the entire world to join together with other Christians to continue to implore from God the gift of peace in the most tormented places of our planet. May peace, the gift of Jesus, live always in our hearts and sustain the propositions and the actions of those in charge of the nations and those of all men of goodwill. Let us all work to encourage efforts for a diplomatic and political solution of places of war that are still of concern. My thoughts go especially to the dear population of Syria, whose human tragedy can only be resolved through dialogue and negotiation, in respect for the justice and dignity of every person, especially the weakest and the unprotected.
Specialmente I più deboli e indefessi.
In a year of faith punctuated by papal events and pilgrimages, the Knights of the Holy Sepulcher of Jerusalem enjoyed both during this mid-September visit to Rome. While heads of the order met to revisit their statutes and bring the order up to date and make it more visible on a local level, a total of more than 3,000 knights and ladies were on hand.
We're on a pilgrimage for the Year of Faith, and we were so happy to come and meet with all the other fellow knights all over the world that are here, the thousands of them. And we just had an audience with the Pope, and he gave us his blessing.
Each of us can be wanderers or pilgrims. In the times in which we live, we see many people who are wandering because they lack an ideal of life and often are incapable of giving meaning to the events of the world. But by your example of pilgrimage, you show the will to not be wanderers. Your walk is in history, in a world whose confines are always widening. Many barriers fall, and our paths are all related in a more direct way. You are all a testimony of the profound sense of the light that comes from faith. You must know to conserve the grand richness of values, of wisdom from the past, while still living intensely in the present, committing yourselves to today with your sight on the future, opening horizons of hope with your work to give a more human face to society.
The pilgrimage is at the end of the year of faith. We have approximately 30,000 members in 52 countries. We've spent the last 3.5 days going over the constitution of the order, which has not been revised since the era of Paul VI.
A lot of people think that orders and knighthood are dead, but they're not. They are alive with the Spirit, and we're here to be alive with the Spirit. And by seeing the Holy Father today, we renewed our spirits as we renewed our friendships with other knights. The great thing is that this is an order which is worldwide.
And it's the oldest order of chivalry under the protection of the Holy See. And our main function, our mission given to us by the Pope, is the protection of the Catholic Church and our faith and values in the Holy Land, particularly with the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem.
Stay with us. After the pause, we catch up to the new Polish ambassador to the Holy See during a lighter moment with the Pope. You're watching Vaticano. The Polish embassy to the Holy See has a new ambassador, and as the protocol of the Vatican demands, Piotr Nowina-Konopka presented his credentials to the Pope during this audience. The encounter lasted a half hour. They were able to speak of more serious matters like the peace process in Syria, the canonization of John Paul II, and the organization for the coming World Youth Day in Krakow in 2016. But there was also time for a joke or two.
38 anni, matrimonio felice. Io quando mi dicono una data di matrimonio faccio questa domanda. Chi sopportò a chi? Una molto buona domanda. È vero, c'è Wanda, chi sopporta me. È umile. È vero, è vero.
I used to know the previous Pope, and I had a number of talks with John Paul II. But I must admit that meeting Pope Francis was still another experience of somebody who is extremely direct, who shortens the distance immediately. You are very emotional when you enter his library, and you are afraid that you will be not able to have a normal conversation. To the contrary, after half a minute, I had a feeling that I know Pope Francis since very, very long. And I understood better the stories about when he calls people here by fixed line or by cells. This is his way. He's so direct. He treats another people not as subordinates, but as somebody who is absolutely equal to him. And you must think about Apostles' times, when the Pope, St. Peter, was just an ordinary man.
At the end of the audience, Mr. Nowina-Konopka was able to introduce the rest of his family to the Pope. His grandchildren had a special effect on him. He spontaneously accompanied them to an image of Mary, leaving some flowers and a lasting impression on the new ambassador. This bookstore next to St. Peter's Square sells reading material, of course, but also many religious artifacts and jewelry. One of its highest-selling items these days is the replica of the cross of Pope Francis. The Pope's own silver cross was purchased right here for about 350 euros.
No el Papa en persona, sino un amigo del Papa.
It wasn't the Pope in person, but a friend of the Pope's who gave it to him. This is the cross in its original size. It's a cross that represents the Good Shepherd, that is, the Lord himself who takes care of his flock. It's a very well-known theme in the Catholic Church and very much loved by the Pope.
Muy querida al Papa.
The cross was designed by an artist from northern Italy. Around 50 of the original silver crosses have been sold since he became Pope, but now the shop is also selling 4 smaller replicas of his cross.
This is one in silver-plated bronze that runs for 100 euros. And then we also have lower quality materials for cheaper models, 4 euros, 2.50, and one for only €1.
The smallest 2 are the most popular. The Pope has often voiced his stance against consumerism. In that case, selling the symbol around his neck, a humble silver cross, could be seen as contradictory.
It could be interpreted in that way, that many people want something of the Pope's to remind them of the Pope. These crosses are inexpensive for that reason. Although these are made of silver and are rather expensive, these are more modest and cheaper. Lots of people want to take with them a souvenir of the Pope, and this is one that most represents him because he always carries it with him.
Quiere llevar consigo un recuerdo del Papa.